Even though the Paralives early access release date was delayed until May 25 next year, this week's dev chat was interesting enough that I still thought it deserved its own video. If you're new here, Paralives is an upcoming life simulator, and each week Patreon members supporting the game have the opportunity to ask the Paralives developers questions, and they just made the chat from October 24th public, so let's take a look at what was discussed. First up, we have a couple questions about voices in the game. Can you tell us how many voices we can choose from, both masculine and feminine, when the game releases, and if they'll have voice pitch sliders? So for early access, it looks like we'll have 4 different adult voices, so 2 masculine and 2 feminine, 1 for children, 1 for toddlers, and 1 for babies. We'll also get more voice options and pitch sliders at some point during early access too. And there's another one about voices as well. So will voices and voice pitches be inherited genetically? And it looks like no, it's not planned for now. I think this one's a really interesting question actually. I didn't really consider voices being inherited, but I suppose that makes a lot of sense. Even if they're not inherited genetically, I hope that the voices are at least randomized so that we don't end up with every para from new generations inheriting the exact same voice. It is good that we'll have pitch sliders. I think that'll make a lot of difference for different kinds of voices in the future and give us a lot more options. This one was a bit like out of the blue, but where is the cellular tower in Paratown? Does everyone get good reception? So Jeremy says, I don't think the cell phone reception is going to be a gameplay mechanic, nor is it planned to have a cell tower in town, but that'd be a fun touch. And I agree, this is never something I've actually thought of in a life sim game, but wouldn't that be so cool to have like certain areas of town that doesn't have any reception at all, and like maybe you could live a sort of off the grid lifestyle there? That would be really cool to not be able to like actually contact anybody in those areas. Yeah, what a great idea. We have 2 questions about death in the game. How can NPCs die on lots, and can they die on community lots? By NPCs, I mean townies that randomly spawn and playable households we already have in the world but are not playing at the current moment. So Anna says here that for now, NPCs can't really die since most of the possible deaths are associated to needs and they don't have their needs updated like our controlled characters, but it might change in the future. And just before I comment on this one, the second question about deaths was how many death types will there be on early access? And we're told that for now it's just 4: hunger, exhaustion, age, and fire. So for the previous questions about NPCs dying, I kind of assumed that fire would be able to kill those paras. So I would be surprised if that's not the case. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But Anna did say in the answer to that first question that most of the possible deaths are associated to needs. So maybe she was just forgetting about fire when she answered the question. I hope that gets clarified. We have a couple questions about food. How extensive will the system for cooking meals be in Paralives by 1.0 or beyond? Will a para be able to select specific ingredients and perhaps choose exactly how to cook meals? And will it be possible, whether officially or through mods, that meals might affect a para's motives? For instance, certain meals might give a para energy. And Jeremy says, while it's fun to speculate and think about the future, we're currently focusing on what will be available for early access, which means the cooking system is pretty simple with no ingredients or special effects for food items, if you don't count non-vegetarian meals being unpleasant for vegetarian para folks. As for what the future holds in store for us, it's really hard to say. We'll get back to it when the timing is right. And the reason I wanted to go over that question was because there is a second question about food again, so some of this context is important. So the second question is, will there be a grocery store or some place where we can buy food for our paras? And if they wanted to go out to eat, could they go to a diner or a restaurant? So Jeremy says here, because you don't need ingredients to cook, there's no grocery stores in the game. You can buy food at the cafe currently, and we'll add more town interactions as things go along. So we're going to have a very basic cooking and food system to start with, which I think is totally fine. I think some people were keen for a grocery system, kind of like Sims 2, where you would have to actually buy groceries to be able to cook food, but it looks like we won't have anything like that, at least to start with. And you will be able to go out to the cafe and buy things like pastries, but nothing particularly complicated at this stage. There's a bit about mental illness and neurodivergence here. Knowing that a lot of the fan base is neurodivergent, how would the issue of neurodivergence, mental illness, and mental disability be handled in the game? Knowing how the lines can't easily be separated from personality, and knowing the personality system already in place works on a positive trait system, I would understand if it becomes too hard to represent and therefore either delayed or not addressed directly, though I'd also imagine it could be said that this is a huge part of many's lives and therefore should be represented in a life sim. I personally would be pleased to see players being able to represent their joys and struggles within the game if they so choose. And Anna's response here is, while we do think representation is important, there isn't any personality trait or quirk directly associated with any mental illness or neurodivergence diagnosis, since every neurodivergent person is different and we don't want to portray the hardships of disability as game mechanics or labels. We do not want to gamify any serious illnesses, mental or physical either. However, I think our personality traits can be used to portray a neurodivergent person. For instance, my own ADHD character, I personally like to use the energetic stoic vibe, the good at being alone social perk, and the jack of all trades talent. There are also items linked to disabilities that Chloe made to help with representation, like a weighted plushie, stim toys, communication cards, meds, and also items linked to physical disabilities. We also have mod tools, so if people in our community would like to mod in their ideas of neurodivergent traits and bits of gameplay, I think it wouldn't be too hard to do. I think this is a really interesting one because I can understand that many people are going to want to be able to portray themselves in the game, and like they said, you know, it's a life sim, people want to be able to represent their life, but I think this is quite challenging to really include in practice. I do like the approach that they've gone for, so instead of having like a formal label, being able to have things like vibes, talents, and social perks to represent those differences in other ways is a good idea, and I really like that they do already have a bunch of items that can be used to help. So they mention the weighted plushies, stim toys, communication cards, meds, and other items for physical disabilities. I do remember seeing that there was a wheelchair that you could sit on. I don't think that was something that would be actually used as a wheelchair just yet, but yeah, it's good to see that they've actually really considered these things. It would probably be quite challenging to represent all of this very accurately and in a way that's very well done. So I do agree that having these things like vibes and social perks and those sorts of things instead of a formal label is a good idea. There's a few on babies today. Are there any baby carriers or other ways of toting babies around while your adults go around doing things? So no, at least not for now. It would be quite cool to have a baby carrier, like maybe carrying a baby on your back or maybe a little stroller. That would be very cute, but I doubt this would be something that they would consider including until like way in the future. There are many other things to focus on at the moment, but it would be a very cute touch. The last question here about identical twins was from 5 years ago. What's the status on identical multiples? Can we have multiples who share the exact same genetics? For now, there's not really a difference between types of twins. In theory, they should all be identical, so they would share the same genetics, but their look could be a bit different. For example, if they're blonde, they might have a different blonde color. Twins and multiples and pregnancy still needs to be tweaked a little bit before early access anyway. And then there's another question about twins as well. Following up on that, are there any in-game markers for twins or triplets, like a relationship label, maybe even specific markers if they're identical? And we don't have that yet. I do wonder about the twins where they've said that they would share the same genetics. Have we seen much about genetics? Like, does that mean that potentially all babies from the same parents would look the same? So even if you have one child and then another child in a separate pregnancy, would they be identical then? Yeah, I hope that's not the case. I hope they've made it so that each child has slightly varied genetics across different pregnancies. But for now, it looks like they'll be pretty physically identical when they're multiples at least. I think that's okay for early access, but I hope that this is something that's worked on a bit later. I do think as well the idea about having a relationship label for twins is a cool idea. So I think it would be very cute if you had like a pair of twins and they were like a lot closer by default as twins usually are. I think a special little label like that would be really nice. There's a few questions about relationships. As far as gameplay or autonomy goes for paras, will other paras or NPCs build friendships and relationships along with our town, or will that be added during the early access stage? I'm really looking forward to story progression in it and seeing other paras around me live their lives too. Jeremy says that NPCs will not build relationships by themselves, but this will be added during early access, so I'm very glad to hear that. I think it's understandable that like this is technically part of the story progression, and I don't think we've ever been promised that this would come for early access, but it would be something that would be really great to see once the game is a bit more developed. It definitely makes the town feel a lot more lively and like the world is actually changing and evolving independently from your household. Is the relationship between two paras only defined by one single label from friendship and romance, or could it be that they have multiple relationship labels? For example, a best friend label and a crush label, or a rival label and a crush label. You can have multiple labels together. Some of them currently could make more sense, so you can be an acquaintance with your friend, but it's still part of the game will improve. I think that's pretty cool that we can have multiple labels. I think it does make a lot of sense. And obviously, yeah, we'll get some combinations that might not make a whole lot of sense, but I think we can probably put up with that for a while. Are there relationship labels that are family labels like parent and sibling to keep memorized that paras are from the same family, or is it not in the relationship labels at all? Yes, we have family labels used to track the links between characters. This is really cool because we're supposedly not getting a family tree for early access, so at least there is some tracking of parents and siblings and family and all of that. And I suppose this leaves room for special interactions between different types of family members, so this is really good and I'm very keen to explore this in actual gameplay. But yeah, really good that they've put this in already. I had a quick question about aging. Is it possible to have our active household aging but not the unplayed paras, aka NPCs, or is it only the two options so everyone ages and nobody ages? You can choose whether household and non-household characters age separately. This is good. I think many people will be happy with that. I know some people really like to take control over when characters age up for their household or for the townies, so this is really good to see. Will there be a library or bookshop in town? And with this question, we will have a library and a bookshop in the town. And that's really great to know. Because yeah, it'd be fun to shop for books, but I think the library as well is going to be really good. So just being able to go in somewhere and read and study and all of that. I think it's like one of those necessary things in a town, like kind of feels a bit empty without that. And I personally really like going into bookshops, even when I'm not planning on buying a book. It's just fun to take a look around. So I'm really keen to see this bookshop as well. We have one about hair. My questions are about the amount and variety of type 4, coily, kinky and afro textured hairstyles that will be available on December 8. Particularly, I don't think I've seen any locks, so I wanted to ask if you have any locked styles in the game. Also, if you're able to share, can you tell us what the percent of current hair catalogue is type 4, locked or other culturally black hairstyles? We have 2 hairstyles with locks and 2 braided hairstyles in the game at the moment, and for the percentage, I'd say about 10% of that I would consider culturally black hairstyles or more textured hair. Once the game is out, we'll be able to add a lot more hair depending on what people would like to see and what we feel like is missing, of course. This is great. I don't think we've seen like a full catalogue of all of the hair in the game, but I'm glad they do have some to start with and they are actually planning on adding more. I'm sure people will point out things that are missing very early on, and the team really does seem to take our feedback seriously, so I highly doubt that we're not going to be heard on this. I think that they will add in a lot more different hairstyles for us. It would be good to actually take a look at these if they're able to do a little preview for us, maybe in a public Patreon post. That would be awesome. And the last question I wanted to include was this one, just because it made me laugh. I know a lot of people are like, is it live mode or is it live mode? And obviously by reading this, you cannot tell which one everybody decided on. So it just makes it even more confusing. So interpret this how you will. And that's all for today. I'm not sure how many more dev chats we have or if they're continuing to do these, but if we do keep getting them, I will continue doing these weekly dev chat videos. Otherwise, I'll just make videos when we get updates from the team. There is going to be a live mode live stream on YouTube in a couple of days, so definitely watch out for that. And I am working on another video on what's next for this channel in light of the recent delay of early access, so stay tuned for that because I do have some ideas, but I also really want to know what you guys want to see as well. Anyway, that's all for now. I'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone.